Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jordan Rudder, Director of Public Relations at American Bird Conservancy. Today, we're going to hear from David Ascanio, leader of the expedition that rediscovered Urich's Tyrannulet last month in Venezuela. Just a few weeks after the successful expedition, John Mittermeier, Director of Threatened Species and lead for American Bird Conservancy's Lost Birds program, caught up with David to learn more about the bird and how he found it. Today, we'll be engaging through the chat that is next to the video if you're on a web browser, or under the video if you're on a mobile device. David and John are online and will be answering questions throughout the video presentation. After the interview portion, you'll get to enjoy a slideshow of David's photos from the expedition, so stick around to see some of the bird species that the team observed. We hope you enjoy this presentation. Thank you.
I'd love to. Let's just start with a little bit of background and provide some context for anybody listening. So to start off, I'm John Mittermeier. I'm helping to organize American Bird Conservancy's search for lost species. And one of the birds that came out as we were looking for, sort of trying to find potential candidate lost birds in the Americas, is a species called Urich's Tyrannulet from Venezuela. And so you have some past experience with this bird. You've got some recent experience with it as well. But to start out, how about you want to just introduce yourself, and then maybe we can give a little bit of background on this Tyrannulet and describe this bird for people who might not have heard of it before.
Well, thank you, John. My name is David Ascanio. I'm Venezuelan. I grew up here. I am actually, my profession is sort of an administrator accounting, but I've been interested in wildlife since I'm a kid. I've been birding since '78, and I have made my life around birds.
So David, can you tell us a little bit about the history of Urich's Tyrannulet? What's its taxonomic status? When was it discovered? A few things like that, just a bit of background.
This bird has suffered such a checkered taxonomy in more than 100 years that it's kind of hard. In fact, we're preparing a manuscript now describing, sort of setting up the history, the taxonomical history, because it's fascinating. So Urich is collecting here somewhere in the northeast of Venezuela. And there's another fellow, a son of an Italian family who have migrated to Trinidad as well. His grandfather have arrived to Trinidad like in 1818. And this grandchild called Caracholo, it's also collecting there. And they both collected this flycatcher, and they both took this bird out. One went to American Museum of Natural History, the other went to the UK. And guess what? It's described twice.
Huh.
This enigmatic flycatcher has been described twice. Once in 1899 and the other one in the 1900s, roughly, and by two very different people, two very different groups. It is considered a subspecies of a more widespread bird in southern South America. And one person, based on distribution and some phenotypic aspects, decided it did merit a species status, becoming a new endemic of Venezuela, and they call it Urich's Tyrannulet, Philomius urich. And it's obviously Frank Chapman was honoring Mr. Urich's for providing the specimens. And since then, John, it became a mystery.
Urich's Tyrannulet sort of first gets known to Western science in the late 1800s. So it's kind of the 1890s. And it sounds like it has this sort of complicated history where perhaps multiple people try and describe it at the same time. There's a lot of back and forth as to whether or not this is even a species at all. And then It's sort of sometime after that, you said there was about 4 or 5 sightings after these original ones. So sometime then in the 19-teens or 1920s, it disappears for a while, despite being in an area that sounds like it's pretty accessible, right? This area on the North Coast, it's not that far from Trinidad and Tobago. So why do you think it went this long period of 50 plus years with no one seeing it?
It is indeed a good question. And that is the main reason why this bird is at risk of extinction. And the answer is farmers. The area having easy access to the port of Cumaná and having nice mountains with nice terrain, rich soils and good rainfall, farmers start deforesting. Either some actually change the habitat, the understory, the forest understory, to grow coffee, shade grown coffee. But there was extensive burning and being such a steep hills for subsistence farm in the foothills. But these fires will carry on all over the forest, especially in the dry season. So forests disappear pretty fast by the 1940s and 50s.
So it's in, perhaps when it was first discovered and described, then it might have actually been quite a bit more widespread in this particular habitat and more common. And then you have a lot of habitat degradation that starts to happen in the 1940s, and no one finds this bird for basically 65 years, right? And so we go from the 40s, no one's found it. We know there's been a lot of habitat destruction in this area, and that brings us up to 2005, which is when you decided to go look for it. Is that right?
Exactly. So what I did, Mark Sokol was one of these persons. He wasn't obsessed about seeing all birds, but all the subspecies. And we became very good friends because we travel all over the country trying to nail down all the subspecies of all the birds we could see. And one day, he came with this question and said, David, what about Urich Tyrannulet? I said, well, Mark, are you ready for a mule ride, for real serious expedition? He said, of course. We could only guess where they were collecting in 1890. There's nothing described about it. So we had to go into all documents and trace back the route. And I finally pinpoint a place called Bergantine and Quebrada Bonita, basically the beautiful little stream. And I went out there, I came across a feeding flock, I played back my whole repertoire, nothing happened. And I decided, well, I'm gonna whistle a pygmy, I'll see what happens. Oh my God, this Urich Tyrannulet just landed in front of me. It's like, you know what you want, but when that happens, it's like winning the lottery. You don't know what to say. You have no idea. It's like your brain goes into a massive internal celebration. At the same time, you're trying to keep calm to take the most notes you can. And I'm trying to tape what I'm seeing and like, oh my God, he's here. It's just incredible. And here's the point. On those days, I was photographing with my scope, and I had a tiny camera, which I put in the ocular of the scope. We call that digiscoping. We're talking about a bird that's completely, I mean, you can't expect where is it going to land. It's very active, and I couldn't follow it with the scope. So I took my tiny camera, I zoom in, I just follow it and click. And here comes this super extremely blurry photo, the proof that I have seen the Urich Tyrannulet.
I think a lot of people won't know this particular bird. Can you just describe a little bit what it looks like? I mean, so did you know the instant that it appeared? Were you absolutely sure that was it? What does the Tyrannulet look like? How do you, what sort of bird is it, and how do you differentiate it from any possible confusion species there?
That's an excellent question. When you talk about Tyrannulets, you're really doing like your postdoc in birding. It's like identifying Tyrannulets can be a challenge.
Yeah, I know that there's small canopy birds, many of which look very, very similar. I think that's a great description, the postdoc in birding for these.
So I knew I was looking for something with longish tail, 2 bold yellow wing bars, and this is the clue: 2 bold yellow wing bars. And between the 2 wing bars, and by the way, I was able to check only 1 specimen. There are only, if I'm not wrong, there's like 4 specimens, period. That's all we have. So between the 2 wing bars, there's a black spot there. It's very black between the 2 wing bars. It has a long tail. It has a narrow but longish bill. We didn't know much more than that. So we had to make sure it wasn't a bird called slaty cap flycatcher, the genus Leptopogon, but he sits more vertical and the wing bars are tear-shaped. And we had to make sure that it wasn't another Philomius grisaceps sooty-headed Tyrannulet, which almost have no wing bars. But birds like to make it confusing. So the population there does have wing bars, of course. They're not gonna make it easy for you. So it was really what we concluded those days is the only way you can tell safely that you had seen an Urich Tyrannulet is by a combination of field marks. You cannot just see and say it is a Urich Tyrannulet.
I'm just thinking for bird watchers from North America, this is a little bit of a situation similar to the Empidonax flycatchers. I mean, this is
Oh boy,
a very difficult bird to identify. You need a combination of field marks, and you're sort of putting together these puzzle pieces of the shape, the behavior, the tail length, and then these distinctive wing bars. And I didn't actually realize that when you were talking about it before, but this is, I mean, I've seen that picture. I'd say, first of all, I'm really impressed that you've got a picture there at all. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That actually there are potentially some questions around that observation because, this is such a difficult bird to identify. If I'm remembering correctly, you didn't have a chance to get a sound recording then. And so you have this sighting in 2005 that you're very confident in, Mark's very confident in, but there's still some questions and some uncertainty around it. So fast forward to last month, you go on a new expedition to find Urich's Tyrannulet. What was that like?
The whole week before we decided to leave, it was pouring down in the whole country. And I was like, oh my God, I can't let down John after all this support and tell him it was raining every day. John, the day we found this bird, it was sunny, but overcast. It was perfect. It's like, I don't know what happened. And in fact, I can tell you one thing now. We drove across a mountain that had only shade-grown coffee. It was totally abandoned, few plantations. We arrived to town. We climbed virtually a very steep, bare hill to get into a patch of forest that I saw, and I heard scale and pita. And I said, if there's scale and pita here, this is gonna be a prime habitat. We used the playback protocol, the protocol I've been using when I found it in the first place 15 years ago. Nada. We got a lot of great birds. It's amazing, but no Tyrannulet. But I could see a valley, a river, and a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous patch of forest on the other side of the hill. So I said to my team, you know what, guys, we're gonna split here. The three of you are gonna go back to Caripe. I'm gonna pick everything. We're gonna tent tonight here, and tomorrow with the machetes, we're gonna go down to that river. We're gonna climb that hill because that bird's gonna be there. And with the guy, I went in, Pedro Cabello, who is an incredible young ornithologist, tireless. I mean, we were seeking for this bird like 10 hours. I said, you know, Pedro, we're gonna stay here tonight in some local peasant's house, but let's just explore the area. And Pedro was determined to go up all these steep hills to get into the forest. It's like, let's get into the forest. I said, let's just keep going into this trail, see how it goes. Eventually, we see a beautiful patch of forest in front of us, and the trail leads into that patch of forest. And we were driven by, I don't know, by our guess. We get to a place, and I noticed right away one thing. There is a Tyrannulet called golden-faced Tyrannulet that was very numerous outside the area. But inside the forest, it wasn't as numerous, but they were still calling back. And then I heard a quetzal, and there's a quetzal singing. There's a black and white hog eagle calling. I said, you know, this is good forest. Let's test the waters here. And I just start doing my playback. I see something with long tail. My heart starts pumping fast. I raise my binoculars. All I could do is just shout, Philomias Urich's Pedro! I look like a frog. I just start jumping like crazy. And Pedro's, where is there? There's a bear with a feeding fork. I mean, so I raised my camera, bang, bang, bang. And that night I didn't sleep. At 4:30, you know, we're waking up everyone. Let's go to the forest. We went there. We do our protocol. Urich's Tyrannulet shows up again. Wonderful photos. See it, but no song. I said, Pedro, I'm not moving from here until we see this bird singing. And I said, the other thing I want to know is if there's another pair. So we continue on a trail, and these are mules. I mean, the trail is, you're really moving between blotches of mud because all these mules are walking through to a town in the lowlands. And it is something when you learn microhabitat that's important. I haven't really checked on my program, but I will just speculate maybe 400 meters further on. I look up and said, let's try here. This bird's gonna be here. Soon enough, bang, a second pair came down. As I raised my microphone and I start taping, the bird sang, and as the bird starts singing, I hear click, 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 click. Pedro is photographing. I look at him, he's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, Pedro, this is the first time we're hearing this bird singing. Luckily, the bird sang again. It's a very raspy, like tarang, tarang, tarang. I mean, it's nothing spectacular about its song, but we take it.
Pay attention to the recording making beep 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 beep. It could be the phenomena. Mm-hmm. Okay.